Hello, welcome to How to Paint a Kaiju. I'm Mark Nagata, and thanks guys for coming here. And I guess the main thing I want to say is there's no right or wrong way to paint or paint a kaiju. The most important thing is just have fun. Don't stress about it. You know, it's like, you're going to make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. And in a lot of ways, as I tell my son, when I sort of show him what I'm doing, you only learn by your mistakes. You know, like if something comes out perfect, then it's kind of like, that's great. But in a lot of ways, I feel the best artists are the ones who are able to like fix their mistakes or kind of cover them up really well. So, okay, I got a little PowerPoint thing going on here. So I wanted to start off with just sort of how I came upon sort of my approach to painting kaiju, and it's all based on the vintage toys that I collect. And of course, back then, they didn't have really fancy paints, and they were more concerned with just maybe 1, 2, at the most 3 colors on their toys, and they were factory-based, so they just want to get them out as quickly as possible. But as I look at vintage toys, you can see there's a definite like sort of flow to the way they paint their toys. And let me back up. So they're using, for the most part, an airbrush, which I don't know how many people know what an airbrush is, but basically it's like this little doohickey that sprays out the paint in a mist. And you'll see a little video of me using an airbrush later on, so that'll kind of explain itself a little better. But when I look at vintage toys, especially for inspiration on painting like my new kaiju, I kind of break it down in terms of how the paint flows on a figure. And it's, again, if you see some videos like on YouTube of like factories in China or whatever, they're definitely following a certain pattern. You know, like they'll spray down the body, they'll spray down the arms. So it's a good way to kind of train your eye and train your hand when you're using an airbrush to kind of follow the flow of a figure. So same thing, like some metallic spray down the back, a little orange spray down the front. And also vintage figures like to use contrasting kind of colors on their figures. So if it's a yellow vinyl, they'll put like blues on top of the yellow, green, reds. So again, another example. This one's kind of funny because they decided to just do a little orange thing towards the crotch for some reason. But, it works. So again, it's mostly airbrush. They'll do some hand painting for the eyes. And this one's cool because, it's basically just blue metallic paint. And same thing, you can see how it's just sprayed down the center, down the legs, down the arms, and then a little bit on the head. One thing to kind of note is if you look at vintage figures, they also like to have, I call it kind of this color mixing going on. So like where the paint sort of fades off and starts becoming a little more transparent and starts working with the red of the vinyl in this case, kind of creates this other color that you can't really mix because your eyes are basically looking through the paint and then also seeing the base vinyl going through. So I see some, people who start off painting, it's almost like too much of a stripe when they go down with the airbrush, which is very easy to do because, when you're trying to control the airbrush, I don't know, I guess it's just the way the paint and the air flows, it's easy to make a big stripe, but you want to try to pull back a little and use a little more air, kind of fan out your paint work a little more, so you get kind of that mixing going on. And that'll come up again in the little video I have. So again, looking at my vintage toys, I use those for inspiration. So with an airbrush, you have to use a compressor, which generates the air. And then the types of paints I use are very toxic. So you either want to spray with a spray booth or spray outside, which in my case, I'm able to spray outside. But you still want to wear a respirator, protective gloves, in this particular case, in the example I'm going to show that I sprayed, I started off with a flesh-colored eyes on the far right. And this is optional, but you can also take rubbing alcohol and just kind of rub over the raw vinyl to remove any kinds of oils or anything that might have still be there from the casting process. I don't always do that, but it's good to point out. It also just helps the paint stick to the vinyl a lot better. So this is the airbrush. This is what I use. It's a double action airbrush, so that means you push down for air and then you pull back, and that allows the paint to come out. Generally I spray without this tip part on the crown, just so I can see the needle. I think you can see that. When I'm looking at a figure, the first thing I have to do is put down a base color of some sort. And I usually like bright colors, so I'll start off with some silver, and I'm using Monster Color paint. So if you can see, put the silver inside there. And I want to think about different sections of the toy as I'm spraying, so you'll see as the paint goes on. So kind of get some silver down the front. And at this point I'm not concerned about the eyes, because I'll go back in later and spray those. So I have some silver down the front, and then probably down the front of the leg and on the feet. And generally it's symmetrical, so whatever I do on this side, I'll do on this side. So same with the arms. Put some silver down the arms. So later on, when you use this type of brand of paint, you have to clear coat it to seal the paint to the toy. Because if you don't do that, then like you could take your fingernail to it and it'll just like pull up. So it's a two-step process. So I'm going to add some green. And I like how it mixes with the red spray. So that's all a good thing. And that's the kind of overspray mixing that just happens naturally on the figure. Okay, so now I'm going to start adding some blue to these sections here. And same thing, it's okay if I spray over onto the flesh. Okay, so now I'm going to add orange. And again, I'm sort of just following the contours of the figure. So like the whole process here probably took a little over an hour. So I tried to compress it a little, but it's still kind of boring watching somebody just paint. But if you see a bunch of jump cuts, it's like, I didn't show putting the yellow on, you know. And occasionally you'll see me kind of just spritz off to the side. And what I'm doing is I'm just clearing any paint that might develop on the tip of the airbrush. Of the little horns or tubular parts that come off there. Back here, back here. So I just want to hit kind of
the tips of them with black. But one thing you want to do to prevent the spray from hitting the rest of the figure is I'll take a cloth and then cover it up so that when I start spraying the black, it doesn't get black on the bottom part of the figure.
So that's the other thing when you're using an airbrush, you have to realize it's like an aerosol. So whichever direction you're painting in, say if you're aiming at the bottom of an arm, the spray actually might drift to the side of the body. So it's okay if you want that. I'm now going to add some silver, and I'm using Mr. Color paint, which is from Japan. And basically it's just silver paint, which is good for the vinyl. So let's see. I'm just using a number 2 paintbrush, and this part, I just put a little blob down here and make sure I don't have any, like I have a little bit of dust on there. Like I don't use a fancy brush or anything because the lacquer thinner really eats into the bristles and stuff, so it's not going to last more than like a month at the rate I'm going, so I just toss it. Just want to make sure when you're applying the paint that you don't go over the same spot too many times, because this is a solvent-based paint, so the more you go over the paint, it's going to start to slowly pick up the paint from the bottom. So if you can get it in maybe 2 or 3 strokes, then that's probably the best deal.
Okay, so now that I've painted in the silver, I'm going to use this template and paint in the eyeball part.
That's my cheat. Only you guys know.
Hopefully airbrush on the inner part of it. And then you have an eyeball.
Okay, so for the final part of this, I'm going to put a little dot of yellow for the pupil. So what you do is use the back of a paintbrush. So you just dip it into the paint. Then you want to just tap it once just to get the excess off. And then with a steady hand, you want to pick up a little more paint. Kind of dump a little off. Okay, so the next step is to heat up the joint here so I can separate the figure into 2 pieces, and that way I'll get it ready to clear coat. So I use a heat gun.
So now I'm going to start putting the final clear coat, and basically that's going to seal all the paintwork in to the toy. And once the clear coat is dry, it'll give a lot more depth to the paint and bring out all the different glitter effects, kind of iridescent effects.
Basically, Monster Color is like an automotive paint. So there are automotive paints you can buy, I think like House of Color and things where you have to mix them up. And it's basically the same thing. I like to use Monster Color because it's pre-mixed. So I don't have to think about it, right? I just grab and, yep. And yeah, that's the final piece. So the other thing is once you clear coat it, you have to wait 24 hours for it to fully dry and harden. So yeah, it's using this type of paint. It's at least a 2 or 3 day kind of ordeal. And even after you clear coat it, you can get what I call dry spots, which are like spots where somehow the clear coat like reacted with the paint weird and it didn't gloss it over. So then you have to go back over it with like paintbrush and some more clear coat and kind of touch up areas. So then that pushes it into the fourth day. So yeah, a lot of people are like, well, why can't you just paint this in one day? And I'm like, because, you know, it's like if you're going to seal it, it's going to take at least another day. Now, obviously, traditional kaiju painters did not use automotive paint. They used, you know, their own kind of toy version of paint that didn't need a clear coat. And so there's other paints that are also on the list, like V-Color and FOK paint that's listed on there. And those you can spray directly on the toy, and you don't have to worry about clear coating it later on. There's like a protective crown that like protects the needle from being bent, you know, like if you drop it or something. But what I found is after hours of spraying, color starts building up on the inside of that crown, and you could potentially like blast out like a weird blob of paint out of nowhere. So I've gotten used to removing the crown so you can see the actual needle, and then every so often I'll take a cloth and just kind of wipe off the tip so there's no paint buildup. So it's kind of my thing to prevent any kind of, you know, weird blobs flying out. Yeah.
So the airbrush, how do you know when you're done applying a certain amount of paint? Like if you want to move on to a new color, do you have to clean out the whole airbrush itself?
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, I didn't want to show that because we'd be here for hours. But yeah, it's crazy because the actual spraying time is literally like 30 seconds, and then it's like dump the paint out, put more. So I'm using thinner, lacquer thinner, which is like house paint thinner kind of stuff. Putting that in the cup, taking a brush, cleaning it out, dumping that out, you know, spraying it, clearing it out. So basically, you have to reset the airbrush for every color, and then I'll put some red in, spray the red. Then it's like, okay, if I'm done with the red, then same thing, dump out the excess, you know, put the lacquer thinner in, clean it out. Some artists I know they are super sloppy. So like I look at their airbrushes and they're like all crusty and you know, just like gnarly and stuff. And so I can tell they're not really cleaning it out between colors, but you know, that's okay. Yeah.
What do you usually use to clean your airbrushes and your needles and caps and all that?
So it's the lacquer thinner.
Just the thinner?
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, after say a couple hours of spraying, I'll back the needle all the way out, and then just make sure I rub it down with lacquer thinner, like on a shop cloth or something.
How often do you replace your needles?
I don't.
Okay.
So again, on the list, I use just a really cheap master airbrush, like I get off of eBay or Amazon for like 20 bucks. It's like made in China, you know, no offense to Chinese, but it's great. It's double action. You know, I find for my work, it's fine, you know, and if it starts getting all weirded out, then and I know it's not eco-friendly, but toss, you know, and then just buy another $20 airbrush. For my illustration work, you know, I use like an Iwata HP B or C, which I also have on the list. But you know, those are $200 or $300 airbrushes. But I just find that when I'm shooting the car paint, in the thinner, it's so harsh on the airbrush that I don't want to, you know, ruin a $200 airbrush every like 6 months or whatever. So you know, that's just me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't catch the material
Yeah.
that these are made from.
So, yeah, so the toys that I make are soft vinyl toys. So that's the material. It's like a soft plastic.
Soft vinyl? Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried like branching out to like any like PVC plastic or like resin?
Yes, you can. So another example I have, and I didn't make the blank of this mask, but this is actually fiberglass and resin. So you can use it's the same paints I used on the toys you can use here. So again, as long as you can clear coat it or seal the paint, then most any surface I think you can use the paints on. Yeah.
You mentioned how you'll have vintage toys as inspiration every now and then, and
Yes.
kind of use them as kind of a map almost.
Yep.
Would you say that you ever do Easter eggs or tributes to certain old toys that you have, or
Yes.
designers? You've done that?
Yes.
Is there any particular ones that
Well,
you talk on?
Yeah, I don't have a picture, but like I recently had a micro run of Axron, like these kind of dinosaur-looking kaiju that I painted. And so I basically used like a standard flesh-colored vinyl, which a lot of the vintage toys use. And then I used like the vintage toy colors, so like blues and reds and silver on the tip kind of thing. So most of if you look at the Japanese toy makers, I think almost all of them are influenced by the old toys, Bullmark and Marathon. So even like Reelhead and those kind of makers. If you look at their work pretty closely, you can pick up little homages of like colors or paint techniques, that they're picking up on. And I think that's only natural, right? Because you have to be inspired by something that's already happened to kind of create maybe something new. So, yeah. Okay. Anything? Yeah, Mike.
Mark, how many hours a day are you involved in this process? How many days a week are you? And how much longer do you think you have?
Funny you would say that. Okay, so the painting of the toys is a relatively new thing, or new phenomenon, and I think I've pretty much only been doing it maybe 14 years now, so it's not that long. But as I get older, I'm finding that it's getting kind of tedious to me. So I don't know if I'm getting burnt out by the process or not. But yeah, I mean, I'm freelance, so I work 7 days a week. You know what I mean? It's like I have my own business, so it's like that's just, it's not 8 or 10 hours every day. But if you look at my Instagram, it's pretty much every day I can post something, right? In progress this, or I'm releasing this. And that's the only way I know how to do it, because it's like, how can you take a day off? So I'm using a black soft vinyl Drazorin, and I'm just gonna do like a dry brush technique. Yeah, so this is, I mean, I was gonna say, you can buy like a Bondi toy for like $10 if you want to practice on something, because they're soft vinyl too. And so I've got some of the toxic thinner here. And I will wear gloves. Now, a lot of the old school guys in Japan, they laugh at me, and they don't use gloves. And at the end of the day, their hands, look like rainbows, and they have like metallic paint. And they literally dunk their hands into buckets of lacquer thinner to clean, Mitch is like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that. Like, that's a little too intense for me. But yeah, there's one old guy named Goto-san, and he painted like a lot of the toys in my exhibit, the Bullmark toys, like from the 60s and 70s. He's still painting today. I mean, he's got to be like, I don't know, in his 80s. Yeah, and when I saw his hands, they were purple, but not from paint. Like that was before he started painting. And then I was thinking, why is his hands purple? It's like, maybe he has some illness or something. But it's when I saw him dunking his hands into the bucket of lacquer thinner, I thought, oh, like, that doesn't look very healthy, but that's okay. He's a strong guy. Yeah. Oh. Okay, so I don't know if you can, okay, yeah, see it. So I am using, should I go this way? V-Color paint. You probably can't find it in the US, but again, on my info sheet, if you ever go to Japan or have a friend in Japan, they could probably pick some up for you. So this is just gold paint, and what I'm doing is I'm just kind of mixing it up in here, and I'm using just another cheap kind of Michaels brush, and what you want to do is literally, rub off some of the paint. And then again, I'm for this technique, it's a little, the goal is basically to kind of highlight the different textures on the toy. So again, taking the brush, and you're just going to kind of run it across the surface. And what it slowly starts doing, I don't know if it's picking up, is it starts highlighting kind of the details. So now you just keep going back and forth, and you want to wipe off the excess. So I'm just kind of running it along the surface here. And then go down the neck here. And I'm still, you know, in this particular technique, I'm still looking at sort of the flow of the figure, especially with dry brushing. I think of it as like a painting. So like say if you want the light hitting it from up here, then you're going to want like the paint to be brighter up at the top. And then as you come down, maybe towards the bottom of the neck, it'll be more subtle or less paint. So I'll have more of the black showing through.
Do you find that when you're dry brushing as opposed to airbrushing, you take into account the color of the vinyl itself more because it's going to be more like featured in a way instead of covered up entirely?
Yeah. So you know, so for black vinyl, you know, traditionally you're going to use like maybe a gold or a silver type of paint. If I had my airbrush with me after dry brushing the whole figure, I'd probably go back with the airbrush and just do little quick hits of, you know, red or blue kind of maybe down the spine just to kind of pull out a little more contrast or interest on the figure. But, you know, it's, again, I think it's up to the person just kind of to experiment with different colors. I mean, I could have used, you know, like a light blue on this or, you know, a pink or even a yellow. And that, all of those different colors would yield kind of a different feel to it. So. Yeah, this is not, let's see.
Do you have any techniques that that you've since evolved from, or you've no longer continued to do?
No, you know, I think pretty much it's always the similar techniques, if that makes any sense. You know, I used to be a freelance illustrator, so I think one of the things that I can kind of separate myself from just a toy painter is to do sort of like mini paintings on some of the surfaces, so like the planets and stuff. You know, that's all just hand painted with a brush, and then but then over an airbrushed kind of metallic field of like the space to kind of give it depth. So, you know, I don't know. I think that's maybe something little that might separate some of my work from some other toy painters. And you know, some guys also, you can, with the soft vinyl, you can also use epoxy putty or epoxy sculpt and actually add new elements to things, you know. You can like add like mini sculptures onto the toys, so you can really customize them in lots of cool ways. But yeah, the dry brushing, I mean, or even the airbrushing, you sort of, after a while, you kind of get into the zone, which if anybody's an artist here, and then before you realize it, it's like, you know, 4 hours has gone by, and, you know, my son's like going, time for dinner, you know. I'm like, what, dinner? Like, wait, I just started, you know. So yeah, it's one of those kind of weird things. Now, in the case of like the eyes on, it's called a one-off or a one-of-a-kind figure. So I can charge like a little bit more money for something like that. But sometimes I do runs of figures, so basically it'd be the same paint scheme, but like 6 of them or 12 of them or whatever. I really hate to do those because it's like a repetitive process, and so really 12 is like the max of my sanity. But I've done up to like 100 figures, and I never more. You know, I was just like, you know, dot, 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 you know, like, okay, 10. Oh, now I gotta do 10 more, 10, you know, like 20, 30, and it's just like, so a guy like Goto-san, this guy in Japan, I mean, yeah, I mean, in his prime, he was doing like 1,000 figures in a day. I mean, it was just like nuts. You know, he'd do like these little candy toy figures and just sit there like, you know, 1,000 literally just on tables and move from table to table, then go back and put a paint mask on, you know, it's like, and I was just like, no. I cannot do that. As I'm staring at his purple hands, you know. He's like laughing away like, oh, you know, you American. It's like, you can't do 1,000 toys, I don't know. But yeah. But, you know, I said, later when I left, I looked at my hands and I said, I think my hands look better, so that's okay. Yeah.
Are most of like kaiju painted as one piece traditionally versus like taking them apart and painting?
Usually they're taken apart.
Okay.
Yeah. So in a production setting, all the pieces are separate. They'll have sort of like the standard paint master that they can look at, but they'll just do arm, 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 leg, leg, leg. And mostly it's one guy, but sometimes it's 2 or 3 guys. So in that case, it's like there's a leg guy, arm guy. And then later on, once all the pieces are done, then they're warmed up and then popped together again. And you know, I've visited factories in China, and it's essentially the same thing. You know, it's like 20 young people, unfortunately, lined up. And one of my figures, Alien Zam, I was there when they were actually painting the whole run, and I didn't order a whole bunch. I mean, it was like maybe 300 pieces, but yeah, I felt really sorry for them because it's like all these underage kids, literally, you know, just sitting at a bench and, you know, like, you know, putting a mask on, and I'm sure they didn't know what the heck, they were making for that day. So yeah, I mean, you know, this technique goes pretty quick. I mean, it's hard, I don't know if you could see that, but it's kind of like starting to add a little bronzy highlight. This is also good if you just wanted to create a figure that kind of looks like it was made out of metal or bronze or something. So you want to use like a black-based figure, and you can use like silver or gold, and it's a nice little technique. You know, I think later on, like when you come up and take a look at it in person, you'll think like, oh, it looks like it should have been harder than that, you know, than just rubbing a little bit on it. But yeah, it goes pretty quick. The key is just you want to just keep the brush moving all the time and not like stay in one area, because then otherwise you start filling in some of the details. And you do want to have the black sort of the vinyl showing through as you're going through it. Okay. Let's see. How are we doing for? Okay, we're doing okay for time. Before I go too far along, I'll also do the eyes and the teeth. Okay.
Do you have a favorite colorway or an appreciation for a certain type of?
Yeah, you know, I think again it goes back to like my collecting. I'm really fond of like flesh-colored vinyl, and then using like the primary colors on them. So like the blues, the reds, the yellows, the greens. I think just because it evokes kind of more of a vintagey feel to it. And I notice, you know, a lot of the people who buy my things, they must like it too, because like those tend to be figures that will sell out faster. I mean, you know, I have some customers that like, you know, kind of this more monstery or kind of rainbow style as well. But I think personally, like the stuff I like to look at is it's kind of more the vintage colors. Yeah. So yeah, again, you know, if it's like something you want to try, just get like a cheap Bondi figure, or you know, like if you have like a dunny or something like that, you can also use that as a platform. And you know, as I was telling my son, I mean, like don't worry about making mistakes. Like say if I don't know, somehow you screwed up and there's like a big blotch of gold or something like that on here, you can always pop the leg off, take some of the thinner and like literally just strip the paint off and start over again. Or, you know, just kind of go with it, right? You know, just maybe, I don't know, maybe this leg's like solid gold. Just paint the whole thing solid, I don't know. Yeah, I just think really, I mean, especially how the world is nowadays, it's like, there's just so many serious things going on. So it's just like, you may as well have fun with one thing, you know, so try to have fun with it.
Would you say that you have a preference for doing like kind of crazy multicolored paint jobs as opposed to using vinyls that are crazy marbles or double pours or glitters and stuff like that?
Well, you know, so yeah, I know right now the trend is to having marbled vinyl or glitters and that kind of stuff, and I love that stuff. But I think from a painting standpoint, it kind of throws me off. Like I almost feel like I don't want to touch it because the whole point of what's happening is you're buying the guy who cast it, his technique of the marbling or the glitter or something. So I kind of freeze up sometimes, and if somebody gives me, let's say, a toy and says like, oh, I want please put your paint on it, and then they send me something that's marbled, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I gotta think about, I don't want to just cover it all up, with rainbow or whatever. It's like I still feel like I need to have some of that glitter or marbling show through somehow. So yeah, it can be a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, no, it's all cool. I mean, the crazy thing is, I mean, I'm sure as you guys know, Shirahama Toys and Science Patrol, I mean, all these guys have gone over there and literally turned the soft vinyl casting world on its head by doing these different marbling and techniques. And for those of you who don't know kind of like what I'm babbling about, so traditionally when vinyl is cast, it's like in a solid color. Maybe they do like clear with a little bit of glitter in it to kind of get it fancy. But these American guys have now gone to Japan and started casting with these different techniques. One of them being marbling, which is like combining 2, 3, sometimes 4 different colors that create like all these swirled patterns in the base vinyl. And yeah, I mean, it's some amazing stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about. But I think just for me, from just like a painting standpoint, I'd rather just have something that's a little more simple to work off of. Yeah.
Clear canvas.
Yeah, clears. I love clear. I approach it the same way. So some of these toys are also cast in clear vinyl. So literally, it looks like it's made out of glass, and those are a lot of fun too. So it's using the same types of paints, but you're going to use, in the case of Monster Color, it's called see-through colors, and it's more like you're tinting the vinyl, so that again you're still keeping the translucency of the vinyl, but not obscuring it too much. So let's see. Okay.
Mark, a question Deanna wanted me to
Yeah.
ask. Do you ever dust your collection?
Oh, dust. Not anymore. No, so my cabinets are probably like 6 deep or 8 deep, and yeah, it's pretty impossible. Well, actually somebody else had asked me, like, when I do something like this, I usually just sell it. So somebody came over and they're like, oh, where's all your customs? And I'm like, I sell them, right? But they thought like I'd have like 30 or 50 examples of like, oh, rainbow or flesh or this. And I'm like, no, like I got to sell them, right? It's like I paint them and, and I sell them. That's what I do. So yeah, if any of you guys ever come over, don't expect to see a whole shelf of these things. Unfortunately, it's not there. It's in other people's collections on Instagram, I guess. Oh, and then getting back to Mike, I think you had asked me about like how long I can keep going doing this. Now, everybody tells me, oh, you can be like Goto-san, you can be 80 years old and, like still painting and stuff like that. And to be honest, I don't want to be 80 years old and still painting and putting on, all this stuff and working with toxic things. So, yeah, we'll see. Hopefully I can keep going. I'm 55 now, so hopefully I can go for like maybe another 8 years or so. But really my true love is painting, because that's kind of like where I come from like the illustration world. So I think I'd really like to get back to just traditional painting. And I never learned how to like properly oil paint. So one of my plans, knock on wood, if I'm still healthy enough, is to actually go back to school and learn proper oil painting. And then probably just transition from this to just being back to a painter. Now that doesn't mean that I'll probably still be painting kaiju, but just in a 2D sense. But yeah, I mean, in terms of painting toys, I mean, yeah, it's fun, but then, I think I've done it enough now that I'm just kind of like gotten it out of my system. And it's, yeah, starting to be a work, which is not a fun word. I mean, probably part of the problem is just, since I'm painting at such kind of a frantic rate that I almost need to take like a month off or something and just recharge my batteries doing something else. Maybe my frame of mind will be better at that point. Okay, so that's I'm almost done prepping it with the gold. Let me check the time. Okay, so whoop, it's a little too much there. And again, it's especially like when I'm airbrushing, even though I'm doing, say like, oh, green here, blue here, red here. There's a certain symmetry to it, but in terms of like where different fades and sprays end or begin, I let that be as organic as possible. I've seen some factory paints like from China where literally it goes red and then dead stops. And then it goes green, then it dead stops. It's just like they cannot grasp this kind of freehand spray technique as well. So that's kind of one of my pet peeves. But okay, so let me just clean out the brush a little bit here. Real quick, so I'm gonna work on the eye real quick.
Do you ever squeeze in any like traditional painting in between all the toy painting?
Yeah, so like if I'm releasing a new toy, usually like on the header cards that I sell them with, I'll try to do the artwork for the header cards. So that's one way to kind of get back to the illustration. field that I used to be in. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna put this upside down just so I get a better angle. But so I've got just some silver paint here, and so again, like the eyes on. Just gonna go in and a little silver there. Now, the one thing I didn't show you is there's also things called paint masks, where like if you wanted to have a hard shape there of like where the pupil is, yeah, the pupil, you could put this like protective metal mask over it and then like spray real quick. You pull it off and it would give you a nice crisp edge. But for this particular figure, I think it's better just to do the hand painting. Let's see, I'll get a little bit of the teeth here. So again, using these types of paints, you literally cannot go over the same spot more than 2 or 3 times before you start picking up the base color. Now you can wait till it dries, and if you've got like a little area that you feel like you didn't quite cover, you can go over it a little bit more. But what I found is it starts building up and starts kind of getting thick and gummy looking. So literally you just want to try to get everything in 2 or 3 kind of strokes. Okay, so a little silver there, and cover that up. I think actually I might just give him a light blue eye here. So just like in the video, what I do to dot the eye is I use the back of the paintbrush, kind of wipe off the excess. So I'm just dipping it in there and tapping off a little bit of the excess, and then, yeah, actually that's not big enough. There you go. So this paint's a little old, a little bit gummy, but so yeah, I mean, that's kind of on there a little too thick, but that's fine. I'll just leave it for now. So I mean, again, it depends on how the level of detail you want to go with the paint. I could go back in and paint the horns. There's like little talons, the toes. What I would probably do is, I mean, you could leave it like this if you wanted. That's an okay look too. But if I had my airbrush, I'd probably go back in on the chest and spray like a bright red, just to kind of break up the monotony. And then again, bright red on the knees. On the back, I'd probably spray a little bit of silver, and then put in some blue and maybe some more red to kind of tie the red back to the back part of it. But essentially that's, I mean, with this type of paint, the nice thing about it is it's, other than the eye, the dry brush part is, it's already dry, right? So yeah, it's not gonna rub off or anything. It's like, it better not, right? I'm going like this, it's like, my hands are gold, oh no. You're like, edit that please, no. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool technique, it's pretty quick. And the big thing is, once you get confident with just sort of what you're doing with this type of dry brushing, and then, like Mitch was suggesting, I mean, you can do different colors. I could have dry brushed like the blue over it instead of the gold if you don't want to have like a traditional kind of statue look Okay, so I think we only have a few more minutes, but if anybody has any other questions or, yeah.
Do you have like a particular Ultra series that you get like your inspiration for your kaiju? Or is it like the whole Ultra series?
Yeah. You know, to be honest, it's got to be from the original Ultraman, 66. Although when it comes to toys, this is kind of weird. I really like Ultraman Ace.
Ace.
Yeah. And but I didn't, you know, I really literally did not grow up watching any of that. It was just the random getting a toy and just like, you know, the whole, wow, my God, what is this?
That's how I came to be. Like I'd have like a kaiju figure I had no idea about, and now I'm like, oh, this is that figure that I have.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird. Yeah, I think also I've spoken to some people in Japan, and you know they'll look at some of my original stuff or original designs, and they'll go, "That's not kaiju," And then at first I was like really offended by it, but then I started realizing, no, they're right, because I mean, I grew up here. My parents were born in America, so I have an American sensibility. Like I collected Spider-Man, Superman, all that kind of stuff. Even though I love these toys, I have this weird kind of take on what I think is the kaiju, right? So now I understand kind of what they're saying, right, or where they're coming from. Especially like Izon, with all the eyes, they think it's more yokai than kaiju, right? And so yokai's like ghost stories and stuff like that. I was like, well, it's a potato. That's why I made the eyes, right? It's like, I don't know. What's a yokai, Yeah, he's a potato. So, yeah.
You mentioned how there's not a lot of rules when it comes to painting or doing vinyl. Would you say that using acrylic paint is one of those that's maybe you shouldn't really do? I recently started messing with painting some of my like Sofubi, and I just felt like I was slapping the artist in the face when I was using acrylic paint almost.
I don't know. Why not? Okay, so yeah, I'm not. I don't like following what people are doing. I mean, this is a general statement. And I don't like people telling me what to do either. But having said that, I feel like most anything should be fair game in terms of technique or media, what you're using. You could use acrylic paints, but you have to realize it's not going to stick to the vinyl. So it's going to be a very kind of, more like a statue. Like, please put this in a safe place. Don't dust it or rub it because it's going to peel off. So it's a more fragile medium. And even with this stuff, even though I'm clear coating it and it's like, automotive and it's super hard and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it can still chip. It can still scratch if you really throw it around a lot. But all that to say, I just kind of feel like, I don't like it when people like say, oh, you should only use Japanese paints on Japanese vinyl, or the whole Sofubi versus China or whatever. Okay, so my opinion of it is Sofubi should be Japanese vinyl, but that's not to diss what they're doing in China. So I still feel it's valid wherever you make your toy, or even Mexico, or wherever you make your toy. You should embrace the toy or the artist because that's something you like, right? So yeah, hopefully, yeah. I'm not talking about flippers, that's a whole nother subject. But yeah, I mean, I can't control that either, right? I mean, I'm not that popular, but occasionally I see somebody on eBay who literally just bought something on my website and then out, say for $100, and now it's $300 on eBay, and I kind of cringe, like, ugh, and then somebody will email me like, oh, it's great, I bought this off of eBay, and I'm like, wait, did you buy that for $300? Because last week it was $100, and they're like, oh, I should have emailed you, but that's sort of the American way too. So I can't really control that part of it. But yeah, my main thing is, you should have fun with this stuff and, explore your creative outlet and, I've seen some inappropriate types of toys that don't appeal to me, and but I know the creator, and the guy is like having fun with it. I'm like, yeah, I was like, go ahead, more power to you. But yeah, so that's pretty much the end of my demo. So thank you.